Welcome to Wednesday in Westeros, the show where we discuss the Game of Thrones TV show and some of the books. I'm your host, Taylor Trask. With me,
I'm Todd A. And I can't believe you got through all those W's without.
I know.
That was like the first week where we haven't had a bunch of noise and stuff to kick it off.
That's right. But it's a show about a show, so that threw me for just a second. But it's another week. Episode 2 is in the can. It just came out last night. We're recording this on a Monday after episode 2 aired, and oh my goodness, there is so much to discuss. I don't even know where to begin on that. So let's instead begin with let's instead begin with actually, since our last episode aired, we've been getting fan mail. Can you believe it?
It's so exciting. We've gotten people actually listen.
Folks are out there listening. They're commenting anonymously, so they're a little shy. They're not putting their comments out there yet. But I'm actually going to read some notes from 2 of our fans, both female fans, believe it or not. We have Samantha from Denver, a friend of mine, and she says, and I'm quoting her here. Hopefully, she doesn't think I'm taking her too out of context. But she wrote something that I found was especially interesting. She says, "Okay, you guys totally reinforce my stereotype that dudes love action at all costs. It reminds me of watching Star Wars with my brother as a kid. He always fast-forwarded the conversation parts or the battle scenes. And I think it's funny. It's Todd is saying how much he loves these episodes where there's just huge battles. Oh my God, I hate those episodes. I honestly can't even follow it to know who's winning or who is on what side." There's a fair point here, because I think we did get a little bit really excited. And I think last episode we talked a lot about how, Hard Home was just amazing and anything where there's action is amazing. But let's be clear. We do that because the show has so often been just episode after episode, especially last season, of just nothing, no action. I mean, it doesn't have to be action in a physical sense, just moving of the plot forward. What are your thoughts?
Exactly what you said. And I just can't say that enough. Like, what really, drew me into it, we may have talked about this off air, but I think we did it on one of our previous 2 podcasts, was what really drew us in were those politics of season 1 and season 2.
Yep.
And a little bit in season 3. And I mean, I thought season 2 to me was so wonderful in this soap opera politic backstabbing quality that it had. Like, I felt like I was like gossiping with people, just about like what's Littlefinger up to and stuff like that. But it's definitely a reaction to the last 2 seasons, which is I want action to happen.
Yeah.
It always felt good when it was like kind of the crown at the end of the season. Like, let's just, let's put the Battle of Blackwater Bay in episode 9 or something. But at this point, with all the, and especially because my big grief with the finale of last season, where we didn't actually see anything strike. We see Brienne like take a swing at Stannis. We see Sansa and Theon jump over the wall, but we don't see them land. We don't see Stannis' head come off. So it's like, God, finally, we need to see, people getting smashed against walls, which will lead us into this episode.
Or just things happening in general. Like Brienne's moment was so kick-ass. Well, Brienne's moment was so kick-ass last episode. It was kick-ass, yes, because it was action, but not. It was more kick-ass because finally something happened with Sansa that was forwarding her character and giving her a little retribution for all the shit she's been through. Totally. Like, she's gone through all this stuff, and finally she gets her a small moment of recompense, for all of that.
Totally. I really appreciate this comment too, though, because it lets me know like what the perception of what we're saying. And there is a bit of like, I have checked out of the story a little bit where I just want stuff to happen, so it's that kind of gave me like a check yourself moment where I was like, oh, really? Am I really just skipping the story just for the action or something?
Yeah, but let's be honest too. Like Hard Home, and in fact, I'm just going to say from this point on, any episode with the word home in it is going to instantly gain my trust. Last night we had home. The last season we had Hard Home. I should go back through and see if there's other episodes that have the word home in it that were equally good, because it just seems to be what it is. So yes, we will. We to on the record, we both love the politics of it. We love the story with the character developments, but we just need stuff to happen too. It can't just be everybody sort of sitting around wondering and nothing happening, which is the bulk of what happened last season.
Well, the other thing that I love about this comment is because it pulls into a larger discussion I have in my head about the fandom of things, things in general, but the show in particular, which is like, I felt like I was such a huge fan for those first several seasons, and I have in many ways been alienated by the show. And so, it's like, I think like, well, am I not appreciating the stuff I used to appreciate? Like, I'm just looking for the action because that's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And then I just go, no, that's just this dumb show. Like, they lost me, over season 5. So now I just
let's be
wanted
honest.
to wrap up.
They've been doing this for 6 years too. So, we've hit that point where much like Lost, like stuff's got to start happening. I have one more letter, but before I mention that, if you are listening and want to write in, you can tweet us. You can leave a comment in the show, wherever you find this, either on a SoundCloud, on Facebook, wherever you find it, shoot us a private message. We'd love to hear from listeners. So if you're out there and you want to contribute or ask a question or shoot us a comment or conspiracy theory, or you just don't like what we're saying, let us know. We'll read it off.
Yeah, we're happy to hear anything. On
that note,
go
ahead.
One of the comments I got this week was from my friend Brian, who he wants credit for the phrase Ned's head and demanded
it's yours.
Give him that credit.
It is yours.
Episode.
What's the oath that Sansa gave out? We'll anoint Brian with the Ned's head comments. But at the end of the show, I'll find that
he appreciates.
We'll give it to him.
Yeah, and you know what? If people go to toddandtaylor.com, although we are planning a relaunch of this site, our tweets are on there. So it is easy to jump down and find us on Twitter there,
Exactly.
Or go to the SoundCloud links and leave comments on SoundCloud, however you want to do it. Like Taylor said, it's all good.
Exactly. We have another comment from Christy in Minnesota. She wrote a lot of different things, but it kind of summed up. I can sum it up by just simply saying, stop spoiling things from the books that aren't in the books, but are fan theories. Meaning, stop talking about things on this show that aren't necessarily canon yet, but are spoilery, and that fans have been talking about it. And hey, I don't read the book, so don't talk about that because it's going to spoil the show. I found that a little interesting because it hit on something you and I were talking about earlier this week, and just about spoilers in general. Go ahead.
There are so many things about that. I mean, one thing is, if anything, last night's episode showed us how stupid it is for HBO to police these spoilers, and even believe that they can get away with people thinking like Jon Snow's actually dead.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, I don't, I absolutely do not want to push back on people who are actually listening to our show. But I do think what you and I have talked about is, if you've watched the show for going on 6 years at this point and have actively decided not to read the books, like, that's kind of on you. I mean, I have to, I defer to the brilliant Judge John Hodgman, who in his podcast once ruled on spoilers, was kind of like, if you don't know that Darth Vader is Luke's father, like, I'm sorry to tell you the thing of like, we'll give you a few months or a year or something to catch up, but we're like 6 years into this. And the books have been around for almost 20.
True. But to in their defense, there is something a little bit, if you are only watching the show, I can see where it would be a little aggravating if all of a sudden you're hearing, that R plus J equals J, or R plus, no, I'm just going to forget the whole thing.
L.
R plus L equals J, or Tyrion is a secret Targaryen, all of that stuff. Although this is a show where we love that stuff, so we're not going to hold, pull any punches. We love the conspiracy theories. We love diving into what the books have foreshadowed that the show could do or couldn't do. I think that's half the fun of what we're doing here. So,
and I mean, I take her point too. The other thing that you and I talked about is that you and I, we like pulling in some of that stuff, but we're not heavy on the conjecture. No. Like we're definitely not heavy on the tinfoil hat kind of conspiracy stuff. I actually did a ton of homework this week, listening to episodes of some other Game of Thrones podcasts, watching a lot of videos on how everyone else is doing this. And it's kind of like, if you just want to watch the shows and not get spoiled, the Cast of Kings podcast is awesome. If you want to explore every crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy, Storm of Spoilers podcast is awesome. But if you want the kind of like middle of the road, like we're going to pull in some stuff that, you know, is on the periphery, but we're not going to go deep down those conspiracy rabbit holes and stuff. So yeah, I don't want to be cruel about it. Like, oh, I still know stuff from the books. I mean, believe me, the fact that, you know, no viewers knew about the Red Wedding or John's death, like, should attest to the fact that book readers can keep a damn secret.
Yeah. Or show watchers just aren't interested in Googling.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's so many people who experienced it like you did, who wanted to know a little bit more and went into, you know, Wikipedia or a Wiki of Ice and Fire and read up on stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't mean to offend Christy or sound like a jerk about that, but we definitely want to make our spoiler policy a little bit more clear. Like, we're going to talk about stuff that we think makes the show more interesting. And again, the show last night kind of bore out a lot of this stuff, and it, you know, it's pretty cool, I think, to talk about that openly, you know.
Well, before we get to last night, are there any things from episode 1 that we missed that we want to cover?
Yeah, there's
hanging
definitely
chads, so to speak.
I'll tell you the biggest hanging chad that just blew my mind. And
to dig up a nugget from 2000. Sorry.
The Cast of Kings podcast mentioned this. And I mean, literally like split my head open when I heard this. So because everyone, I think, who watched it was like, what the hell happened with that murder of Tristane, Martell, right? All the names have escaped me at this point. I've read so many of them again.
Doran's son. Doran Martell's son.
We talked about it. We were like, how did the two Snan stakes get to that boat? What's going on? Or is it the same boat that Jamie was just on? Isn't Bronn on it? What's going on? Yeah. Everyone was talking about this last night. Like, it just made no sense. So when Prince Doran, he is handed a little note before Ilaria stabs him in episode 1. Mm-hmm. And there is a official HBO blog called makinggameofthrones.com. Mm-hmm. And on this, they posted the props from that episode. And one is that note. And that note says, the Princess Myrcella died by poison on our return journey. I suspect Ilaria, not you, but my sister will demand war. I doubt Ilaria's head will appease her. It is a start along with your nieces. Your son cannot stay in King's Landing. I am sending him back on the same ship. So this is what Jamie wrote to Prince Doran, that Prince Doran read right before Ilaria stabbed him.
Gotcha.
And it at least, I mean, we still don't have a good timeline there, but it at least explains that ship was in the harbor of King's Landing. Mm-hmm. Jamie rode in with Myrcella's body, and he sent that ship right back to Water Gardens or Sunspear.
It still doesn't explain how the other two Sand Snakes appeared on that ship, though.
I totally agree with that. It's very weird to think that they rode in some like cargo hold.
Well, because I went back and watched it. They're all hanging out on the dock at the end of last season. So they're all hanging out there in their little dresses. You know, they're not wearing their combat attire. So not only did they changed and somehow snuck onto that boat. And I'm not saying they couldn't, but I just at least give us a little bit more context before you kind of drop that scene on us, because it almost feels a lot like that. This is going to be the worst comparison ever, but it feels a lot like that scene in Batman Begins, where after he, sort of defeats / rescues Ra's al Ghul, Bruce Wayne, it cuts from him on like the Himalayan mountaintop to magically walking down a runway, and Alfred's just hanging out there going, "Hey, Master Bruce, you've been dead for 7 years." I'm like, when did he call Alfred? That's a weird reaction for Alfred to have just after no contact. Like, what is happening right now? Like, and granted, you just want to move the movie along at that point, but 10 seconds of him, like, busking a cell phone in like some village somewhere and be like, Alfred, like that would have been all I needed. But it distracted me like almost the entire movie. I'm just like, what, how did that happen? So much like, those little moments, it's tricky, and that could just be me, but those little moments do, if they're not clarified, they just sort of hang like a haze, like a big fart over the episode, and you just kind of you keep whiffing it. You try to wipe it away, and it's still there.
Yeah, I love that we have a new storytelling, disgusting storytelling term now. It's just a narrative fart.
The narrative fart. Yep.
But I mean, I really do wonder, like, is there footage that we didn't see of them rowing out in the dark of night and climbing on that boat or something, and they just went, you know what, we don't have time to put this in.
Yeah,
because
at the very least, pop it on your YouTube channel or something. Give people,
I know, it's so weird.
People will watch that stuff. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on,
So
HBO.
the other thing I wanted to bring up about that, and it's really funny if you want to listen to book readers who are super annoyed by the whole Dorne plot, definitely listen to Cast of Kings or Storm of Spoilers. But what I had to refresh my memory on is all that history and everything, and what Prince Doran has been doing all along is he has a secret plot to partner with the Targaryens to defeat the Lannisters and take back the throne.
And this is in the books, not in the show. It's not clearly explained in the show if it even is a thing.
And so this is why readers are annoyed with it, because he, in the last season or whenever he was introduced, which I think was maybe just last season, he just seemed like a boring character. But readers kind of knew, well, under the surface, he's the plotting master. Like he's the Varys of Dorne, where he's got there is a Targaryen that no one's met, a little Aegon, who is heading out to meet Dany or something, and I can't even remember what happens to him. And then there's also like a Martell that does meet up with Tyrion and Daenerys and everything, and Meereen. So he's sent like these sort of envoys to treaty with what's going on with Daenerys, and help bring about this overthrow of the Lannisters, I guess. And so there's this, because that's the Dornish hate the Lannisters because of what they did to.
Well, maybe they're trying to condense that or move that faster with all of a sudden now them poisoning.
Definitely. And see, that's one of those things that I think where the show is making a good decision, which is, yes, it was great, but do we need another schemer introduced now in season 6 when we know, like, we only really have what I think has now been confirmed as 13 more episodes past this season.
Is it 13? Is it? And are they splitting it? Do we know
sure,
yet?
But no, I don't know anything other than I saw the number 13 go out there. Okay. And I think that was also thrown out as like, someone just thinks it'll be 13.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think they're just trying to shortcut that. And we've got enough players in this Game of Thrones. We don't necessarily need 2 more that Prince Doran is manipulating from afar.
Well, Ilaria can already take that role on. She has more cause. It's like for them to introduce, as much as I love Alexander Siddig, the actor who plays Prince Doran. Like, I love that guy. He's in a lot of cool stuff. They didn't give him much to do. He was more, I think they cast him more for his sort of calm regalness than anything else. And it's like, why give him yet another thing? Especially because, now Pike's back in the mix again too. It's like, I appreciate where this is, where they're deviating in this case.
Well, yeah. And one of the things that Joanna Robinson said on Cast of Kings is she's so annoyed by this, and annoyed by the fact that, like, maybe they were responding to last season's vitriolic feedback about the Sansa storyline and other woman storylines where they've decided, okay, we're going to have some strong female characters. But she's saying, but they're not really giving these female characters a lot of strength. They're sort of, they've just sort of turned them into killers. And we don't really know that Ilaria is like a plotter. She never has been.
I'm going to go on the limb and say, I don't think Benioff and Weiss, the showrunners / writers of most of the episodes, I don't think they respond to jack shit. I honestly don't think they may look at or hear about it after the fact, but I think at the very least it's just simply, oh, okay. Like, I don't think they have any ambition to respond to. Because think about just the bombardment of feedback from us, from fans who are, passionate about the books and hate the show, and passionate about the show and hate the books. Like, all these people just, if they gave into that even a little bit or even tried to, like, it would never end. So I feel like they are just locked away. And if there's any sort of, if it feels like it's a response, it's more coincidental than anything. Or it's it's the lens we're seeing it through.
And I can't imagine this like crazy chessboard that they have arranged with like how they get characters to what place by what episode and how they're going to shoot that. They've got so many logistical problems to deal with that, I take Joanna's point. I understand, the problems there, but for the sense of expediting things, let's just get on with it. I'd much rather have the Martells involved, as like either the helping bring down the Lannisters or the vehicle through which like Dany may land in Dorne or something when she comes to Westeros. So like that might be interesting that we've established that as a place. So
Sure.
you know, like when Daenerys shows up, that's what it is. But yeah, let's not get into this whole thing. I mean, for God's sakes, that whole like kidnapping plot of Myrcella takes up so much space in books 4 and 5 and just goes nowhere. I mean, you know, by the end of it, there's like, I don't think there's any, anything really cool that's happened. There's no resolution to any of it. So I'm happy about that. But I think that's pretty much all we need to say about last episode.
Yeah, let's you and I get on with it and actually dive into the meat of episode 2. And what a feast it was.
Man.
I guess first impressions from you. When after it had ended, what was the feeling you left with?
It felt it felt very triumphant. Like it had delivered on so many things that we needed to see. But if I pull back one step, I think it did in a lot of places feel like we were fast forwarding through a bunch of plots to get things all to happen. But that's what I've felt in other episodes like that, where they just, they work this suspense out so long and then they decide like, we're going to tie it all up in one episode, What did you think? I mean, as a non-reader.
Yeah, it felt like a throwback to seasons 2 and 3. It had that feeling of like, and part of it was because, we saw more character with character moments than we have before. Kind of echoing what we said last time, where we need to get people back together again to kind of give that give that chemistry boost that we've been looking for. So we had a lot of that, and we'll detail that as we go. But it just had the nice mix of WTF moments, both good and bad, with suspense and some kind of slower, more methodical stuff still that still felt right. It felt like I was watching. It gave me the feeling like, and I was hoping for this too. I'm like, if we can just get back to that vibe of season 2 and 3, and this really kind of brought me back to that. I felt like it was 4 years ago, and we were in that same kind of run of episodes. So that was good.
And I'll start with a scene that I don't think either of us put in the notes, but I think is such a great example of that. Is the scene between Jaime and the High Sparrow, which was like so full of menace and the threat of violence or action of some sort, but it was really two men talking about politics. And one of them just having like a really brute force sense of politics and threatening, even though he didn't act on it, and the other one having this really detached, like little finger kind of, pulling the strings. We're men with no homes and no families and no fortunes, and we're going to take over an empire. And it's like, that is like actually way scarier than what Jaime just said to him.
Casting Jonathan Pryce as the High Sparrow was one of the best. I mean, they made a lot of good casting decisions, but that was one of the best ones they ever did. Yeah. Jonathan Pryce has this weird way of delivering innocent dialogue with an undercurrent of some kind of mischief or sinister aspect to it. And like everything he says is the High Sparrow. You can take it on both sides of the coin. You can take it completely two-faced. You can take it, he's just being, he's just we are just simple papas, and we don't. At the same time, like you can just see in his face, he's like he has bigger machinations at play. He has, he knows a bigger game is going on, even though he won't admit it. Someone like that. To take the power that they did and the time they did with minimal resources isn't dumb. Isn't just some innocent pauper. Like there's definitely something going on there, and that was on display in that scene. I really dug it.
Well, and I think there is a thing. I mean, not to play this card too many times, but there is a thing that the show has already fast forwarded a little bit with the Faith Militant storyline. Because as I recall in the books, it was a very drawn out thing where it's established that like all of a sudden there are these men in the city and in the sept and they're very like they're very militant people in the faith, and like it was sort of this like as Cersei is losing control of King's Landing, this other power is growing, and in the show we really just saw it as like all of a sudden they're there, and Lancel is one of them. And so I do like those scenes where Jonathan Pryce is like, speaking very calmly with this like terrifying threat underneath. Subtext to it, because that's sort of making up for the time that like we don't want to watch all the exposition of just like, what are we just gonna have a bunch of wide shots of like all these guys in monk robes like slowly gathering, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a good substitute for that. I appreciate it. What's the scene you would like to jump to after that?
Well, let's get the big one out of the way first.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, you're talking about the giant smashing that dude into the wall.
Exactly. Well, which one?
Man.
There's essentially.
I know we had two giants smashing two dudes into walls.
There's the actual giant. One, which. As soon as they're trying, we're talking about the scene at the wall where they're, the wildlings are coming in because they're about to take John's body and kill his friends and Davos and all those guys. All of a sudden the wildlings come in and you hear like the boom, boom. And as soon as that happened, I'm like, oh, the giant's back. And sure enough, one comes running in. And they all come running in, and he gets shot with the arrow. And it was almost like the look at his face is like, what the hell? Like it was like pure annoyance. It wasn't even like, oh, that hurt. It was just like, what? Really?
Honestly, to Samantha's dismay, all I wanted when that giant showed up was I was like, just please pick up one dude and crush
pick
him.
up Ollie. I wanted him to pick up Ollie and just hurdle him across the thing. The treacherous little shit is still there. And he's like, did you notice when they carted them away, it was only, what's the main former Lord Commander?
Alistair
and Ollie were the only ones who got carted away. Did you notice that?
I thought there were others, but, and even though I rewatched it, I can't recall. But I sort of thought that like in the background, a couple of guys were shoved off screen. But
maybe, yeah. But Ollie, I mean, it's like what a weird turn he went through. I mean, and granted, it is character true. It's not like he did something out of character. It's just that he doubled down so hard on his wildling hatred that it's just like he's become like little Alistair Jr. After being groomed by Jon Snow and like all it's oh my god. So the fact that he's gonna meet a gruesome little end, I would hope. At some point.
The wildlings murdered his parents right in front of him.
I get that, and I understand that, but it's just like as much it's like John's influence had no bearing on him whatsoever. It was just like I don't know. It would have been. I'm at that point now where even though that's true and that's a terrible thing, and yes, you feel bad, and maybe there's a whole show that could be built around this kid. I don't care. Like I just want him gone. I want black and white justice for these people at the wall.
Yeah, it would be great if he learned something, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah,
it was like, all wildlings aren't like the Thins or whatever. Because I think it was the Thins that. No, it wasn't the Thins. It was the wildlings because that's where he saw Ygritte, and that's why he, killed her.
Oh, okay.
He recognized her from the raid on his village.
Gotcha.
Yeah, someone on one of those other podcasts pointed out that like Ollie is responsible for killing two of the most beloved characters on the show.
Yep.
Yeah,
but the other giant scene was obviously Sir Robert Strong, which was when they introduced him, because it's clearly the Mountain. I mean, we all know that, right?
I don't understand why there's any doubt about that. Is there?
I don't think there should be any doubt amongst viewers. I think in the world, I think everybody still knows it's the Mountain, but like it's almost like they gave him this new name to make him more terrifying. Because if it was just the Mountain, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's the Mountain," there he is. They knew he died, but when he's Sir Robert Strong, you never see his face. It gives him kind of a more menacing sort of feeling.
That's a good point.
And I think that's kind of why they did, in the story they did that. And you just see,
we know who it is.
Yeah.
But the characters in the show don't necessarily understand who it is.
And I think, even when the guards came to make sure Cersei didn't go to the funeral, and they're all sort of, they see him come around the corner, the Mountain come around the corner, and they're just, they're shaking in their boots. They're just like hoping to God he doesn't try to, I think they know who it is. It's like, there's only one dude who's that massive and mighty and but I think at the same time too, they're just like his myth now is bigger than him, right? Like the myth of the Mountain is now it's this Sir Robert Strong, this mysterious figure it's probably the Mountain, but God, who wants to even ask that question out loud? You're gonna get your face bashed in the wall.
Yeah.
Randomly. What did you think when that happened? Was that expected? Did you think that particular thing was going to happen to that townsman?
I just, it was such a that was another great throwback to sort of the Joffrey days.
Yeah.
Where the Hound, he always had the Hound going around doing his business, and now we've just got another Clegane brother doing it. But it was definitely that feeling of the old school Game of Thrones. Like
that's what I'm saying. Little moments like that really had me nostalgic for seasons 2 and 3. You know, like those callbacks that were new but still had that essence of this is how we used to do things. And it's just new and improved. But let's go those things aside. Let's talk about the real mountain of the scene that was the very, very end. And I totally called it last episode. I said by episode 3, he'd be back. And sure enough, at the very tippity-toppity end of the episode, we saw the reveal. What were your thoughts? Did it happen like you wanted it to? Did you feel like was it worth the suspense to you?
I want to know if you think what'll happen if episode 3 opens up and we see Jon Snow sitting upright on the slab, and then he just goes and collapses again.
Well, they've already shown. They've foolishly shown a thing where he's walking around the wildlings and like, you're a god. They think you're a god.
Well,
sir.
but we don't see him in that scene, and it's just a voiceover, I think, from what's his name.
Oh, the redhead wildling.
They show all the wildlings kind of back up. Oh my God, I cannot believe I just forgot that dude's name. And we hear him talking over it, saying, they think you're a god.
But who else is it going to be besides him?
I know. I think so
Tormund,
too.
by the way, Tormund
Giantsbane. Yes.
Yeah. Had to Google that.
Yeah. I'll tell you so the thing that was very cool about the whole Melisandre scene for me is that, again, in the books, the story of Thoros of Myr resurrecting Beric Dondarrion is that Thoros was sort of this drunken, just like a gadabout kind of guy who didn't really believe the religion that he preached.
Gotcha.
And he whispered this prayer when Beric was killed, and Beric came back to life. And then he became this huge convert, and oh my gosh, I did not realize what the Red God could do.
Gotcha.
So to me, they played that whole scene out in Melisandre, which I thought was so cool because it was like she has been stripped of all her power. She feels vulnerable. She feels like worthless. Davos comes to her with this, good but weird speech. Like, why is he the one pushing?
Well, let's talk about that real quick because we'll come back to this because this is an important point. I've been seeing a lot of conjecture online and comment sections and from people that everything Davos did was very out of character. I happen to totally disagree. And it's like they're like, why would Davos all of a sudden? Why does he care about Jon Snow so much? Why is all of a sudden he friends with Melisandre? He hated magic. He didn't believe in any of this.
Right.
What you have to remember is Davos is a hopeless romantic. Here's a guy who let Stannis cut off his fingers and still followed him because Stannis is an honorable man. Mm-hmm. Like, Davos wants so badly to believe in something good and just and true. He's almost like the counterpart to Brienne. Like Brienne's sort of knighting scene last week was almost sort of her equivalent of what Davos wants. He wants somebody who's good and just to just lead the world, and he wants to be at his side. So I think in Jon Snow he saw a lot of that, right? And he had a sort of a smaller exposure to Jon Snow, but given the fact that his king is dead, his friend, the king's daughter, was miserably killed. The whole army's gone. He knows and has seen stuff north of the wall, so he has an inkling of what's to come. And he heard, obviously, when they came back from Hardhome, he heard tale of what happened. And just his experience with Jon Snow is like, why wouldn't you want to keep that dude alive? Like, who else is there? And for him to go to Melisandre, he's seen her do her thing. They haven't gotten along at all in the past, but if anything, it almost speaks more to Davos's character that he's like, you know what, let's try this.
I like it. Plus, the show needs more of those people who I don't know if it's in the previews for next week. I think it's in trailer 2 that preceded the season, which is Davos is in. Yeah, it must be in that trailer. He's in some kind of castle or something, and we know it's the Mormont castle because the sigil's behind him, and he's saying to them, the real war is between the dead and the living. Mm-hmm. And it's like we need people that have that perspective on the show, and I think that's why he's pushing so hard for Jon Snow, is that somehow he's glimpsed this power that Melisandre has, and he's realized the only way to fight the dead or with these, these big heroes or whatever. So,
and it's just a cool character moment for the dude who doubted her most to suddenly be her cheerleader. That was a really cool moment for him to be like, get out there, Melisandre, you can, like, it was just such a weird, but also really cool moment between these two characters. That's what a show needs. You need development between characters and characters to change their opinions over time of things based on the situation they're in. That's what a story is. So it felt like every time I saw somebody bitching about Davos, I'm like, do you understand how fiction works? Like, it's such a, and there's some, there's some basis to that argument, but that's not who Davos is as a character.
Right.
Like,
and it's been 5 years since he was angry with Melisandre.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just another point of order. I always hear people describing the magic act that Davos first saw with Melisandre as when she gave birth to the smoke baby.
Yeah.
But I've been referring to it.
Go be the lost smoke monster, by the way.
Good point. Maybe that's why I don't like it. I prefer to call it the ghost placenta.
Yes.
So if we want to refer to it as some way on this podcast, hopefully we'll just refer to it as the ghost placenta.
Okay.
Yeah. So Davos has always had his eye on the bigger picture. Yep. Even with Stannis, like the reason he served Stannis was sort of a bigger picture feeling of like he's, we need the right man in charge, not another Game of Thrones, like a bunch of kings fighting each other.
Exactly.
So I think it's totally in character. Can I jump?
Oh yeah, go back because that was my little tangent off of Melisandre.
Well, yeah. So we should go back to Melisandre. Yeah, I mean, do you think? Well, first of all, to back up a little bit further, I do think that if Melisandre had Wake, we would have gotten that more Thoros of Myr moment where like her faith was instated in her. Mm-hmm. It was, but having watched it twice now, I do sort of understand. I mean, even though it's kind of a big cliche that we all pretty much saw coming, like when everyone leaves the room.
Yeah.
But I do think that in the rhythm of that moment, it did sort of work. Because part of me went, oh my God, are they going to leave this for another episode?
I kind of, you know what though? I'm glad you said that because I
really thought they were going to throw him on the fire next episode. That's what I thought.
I thought I am not alone in this. A bunch of people were kind of on the same, like, we want this. My thought was she was going to sort of, basically kickstart or ignite his pilot light with whatever her spell was.
Right.
And maybe there would be like a sort of a motion or twitch of the finger or something, but not a full, he's not back to life yet. They'd throw him on the pyre and then he'd triumphantly walk out of the flames, and they'd reveal him to be both Azor Ahai and a Targaryen and alive.
Right.
And it was almost, and when you think about that, as cool as that would be, that's not what the show has ever done. It's never delivered a moment that ridiculously over the top before.
Right.
So that was never going to happen. And someone else pointed out something really, because I've always been using the whole Daenerys walks out of the flame thing. And you tell me as a book reader, because this was explained to me, because I'm like, well, all the Targaryens can walk out of flames. Like, no. That was a one-off thing. It's never been established that Targaryens are just fireproof in general.
That is definitely an argument that people make. And on one of those podcasts that I listened to, I heard a very competent argument that in the show rules, yes, they are.
They are fireproof.
And the person pointed out they'd been establishing that Daenerys and fire connection all of season 1. She gets in this extremely hot bath in the first or second episode.
That's true.
There's another time where the eggs are sitting in a fire and she just picks one out. Mm-hmm. And it burns someone else, but Daenerys holds it and it's not a problem. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, her brother is killed by melting gold. So
yeah, well, he wasn't the true dragon though.
That's kind of one of those fan theories that gets batted around. It's not, I don't think it's explicitly stated in the books. Yeah. Either way. Did you think in that last scene, as the camera pans down to Ghost, did your memory at all? Oh my God, he did warg into Ghost.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. And I was actually watching to see what Ghost would do. I don't think he did. At the way that Ghost react, I think Ghost is just being a loyal dog who knows more about his master than we do. So that was kind of a cool little like, oh yeah, the Ghost knows. and then it happened. I don't, I think, and maybe they threw that in there just to deliberately mess with people to be like, oh wait, they're going to think he warged. And then we'll be like, no, he didn't really warg. I think going back to my comment about Weiss and Benioff, like not following or adapting, I do think they intentionally put in little mess with you moments just for that, just to kind of jerk with the show watchers and book readers alike. That might've been one of those sort of little like either nods or like, we're going to fake you guys out for just a second. Just if you're thinking too hard about this, don't.
Well, and what about the bigger picture here, which is this stupid effort on HBO's part to convince us that Jon Snow is dead? I mean what do you,
why?
do they, I don't really, it sounds so dumb to ask this question in the context of a show about dragons and sorcery, but like, did they lose credibility doing that? I mean,
I don't think they lost credibility. I just think they look kind of dumb and like what?
They just look stupid. Yeah, that's what it is. It just looks stupid.
I mean, on one hand, you could argue they created conversation by simply being in denial the whole time. So they kept it, a conversation, even though it was a false conversation to have. There's that. They're like, okay, but who needs to promote the show any more than it needs to be promoted? Honestly, like, what
they're so crazy paranoid about, like set photos and stuff. I mean, there was some report last summer of Kit Harington telling someone, please don't take my photo here, when he was spotted in Belfast or whatever. And the person went ahead and took it, and like just that, it's just like, if they had never come out and told the actors to say, no, he's definitely dead. Like, I mean, I just don't know how they thought that line would work.
I mean, in their defense, he was dead. He was dead for a little while.
Yeah.
So like in their defense, that was technically true, but they knew, I mean, everybody knew what we were asking. I mean, but think about this. If you were writing the show or you were marketing the show, would you say, oh no, he comes back, just watch? Like, I mean, what other choice do you have?
Well, or just say you'll have to tune in to find out. I mean, it's the speculation still would have run crazy just with him being spotted on set and stuff like that. I just think it was so stupid. It just like you said, it just makes them look dumb. Like, why perpetuate this lie for 10 months of the year?
The one thing,
no one believed it.
I know, so weird. I saw that likened to a Benedict Cumberbatch is really John Harrison. Like, it was that same old Wicked again, where it's like, he's not Khan, he's John Harrison. Everybody, look. And nobody bought that for a second either. It's the same. I don't know. I feel it's just like these old school marketing guys not having a damn clue how the internet works or how modern culture works, and how people remember and can easily see the rhythms of a story play out. It's just like, come on. At the end of the day, it's not that this will go on looking at and loving the show long after that has been long forgotten. Like 10 years from now, I'll be like, oh, that's right. Remember when HBO denied that? Like it just won't even be. It won't even be a thing. After Westworld completely just destroys us in every way, shape, and form, we'll be like, oh my God, HBO's a genius. It's like there won't be thoughts back to this, really. It'll just put it in context.
It's really, really weird to me, and it's one of those funny things where the book doesn't even have to answer those questions. John's dead at the end of the book, and readers wonder about it, but George Martin doesn't have to come out and make statements like, no, he's definitely dead.
Somebody said
he almost doesn't want to.
Somebody said, wouldn't it be hilarious if the one thing that the show is doing against the books is bringing him back, and then in the books he just stays dead the whole time? Like, what if that's the one thing George Martin's like, nope, he is dead.
Yeah, Stannis is the secret Targaryen because he's alive in the books.
At this point, I wouldn't be fascinated. But I want to bring up one more thing about this scene. This scene and just this whole buildup, and I've mentioned this show in the past, but one of my other favorite early HBO shows is called Carnival. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's 2 seasons out there. It's unbelievably amazing. It is almost the sort of primordial ooze that all these other amazing shows have sprung out of. Some people say The Sopranos, and yes, but like in terms of this kind of storytelling with this giant ensemble cast and these amazing locations, Carnival is almost like the proto Game of Thrones. You can't have this show without that show kind of paving the way. But there's a scene, very similar kind of scene, actually a couple of scenes in that show that are very akin to this Jon Snow resurrection, where it's, they build it up just carefully enough, and then there's sort of a failed attempt, and then and if you watch those scenes in that show, the way the music kind of they craft it perfectly. What I was missing from last night was there was no score underneath Melisandre doing her thing. It was just silent. And the music they cut to as soon as Jon woke up was almost too jarring. So I feel like they could have done a little bit more to just sort of, to play with the emotions of that scene and kind of just, even some very small or light piano or orchestration or just something while she's doing her thing. And that was the only thing I would have wanted if it wasn't going to be, throw them on the pyre.
Right.
But I just, again, it was still had its punch. I just kind of wanted some. I kind of left the episode going, it could have been just a little stronger. It could have just they could have milked it just a little bit better. That's just me. It's just my own. Person.
Well, let me jump you to another scene, which is what were your thoughts on the entire Greyjoy storyline that we saw?
Back at Pike. So, well, first of all, I hate to say this, but I think poor Yara is going to be leaving us soon. Just in the grand tradition of the show, when you have a character so kick-ass that should rightfully be in charge, they're probably going to die. So Yara's probably not long for this world, sadly. But I left last, the first episode. I think we mentioned it when we chatted last week. I just don't understand why the Greyjoys or Pike would why even go to the trouble of reintroducing that, but it occurred to me, as I'm sure it did you or book readers that probably long realize this. What does Pike have a lot of, and what is Pike known for?
Yeah, and what just got burned in Marine?
And when I actually, once that occurred to me, I went and Googling. I'm like, oh God, no, everybody's been aware of this for a long time. So Pike obviously has a lot of ships, and there's a character, and you correct me if I'm wrong. There's a character in the books named Victorian, who is Balon's brother. Balon, Euron, and Victorian are all brothers, and Victorian and Euron both come back. And Victorian ends up taking, is it Victorian or Euron that take a bunch of ships to Marine to court Daenerys into marriage? Is that how that goes, or am I missing?
Yeah, I believe that's Euron. Euron Crow's Eye. But Euron and Victorian, I can't ever tell apart. I know there's something I'm supposed to be aware of that differentiates them, but
what I'm wondering is if Theon fills in for Victorian, because I don't think they cast him and I don't think they're going to introduce him. What if Theon becomes the avatar for that story? So he ends up going. Well,
that's interesting. Do we know if they cast Victorian? Because
I don't think they did.
So the two brothers we saw last night were Euron. We think, because I thought it was very weird that neither of them was named.
Oh, Balon called him Euron. He mentioned he said his name out loud.
Oh, did he say Euron Crow's Eye or whatever?
He named him Euron. I mean, I know the name Euron was spoken aloud. I just don't remember. I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but I'm almost positive, because that's the only reason I know that name was because it was mentioned in the show. I was like, oh, Euron, okay. It's weird he wasn't at the funeral. So it's unclear to me how and why and all, why he's even back and all like that. I'm sure to be revealed.
I know, it's very weird. So the other brother that we met was Aeron, who is the priest. He's Aeron Damphair.
He's been there before, though. We've seen him. He's the maester, right?
I mean, he's the priest of their religion, which is a religion we haven't talked about a lot. Which is the drowned god and the salt throne and all that stuff. So he may have been another episode, but I don't remember him.
No, he was around last season, because I thought he was the creepy brother who everybody had been talking about. They're like, oh no, he's just a priest. But he's the one who tells Yara, he's like, oh no, you're gonna have to compete with everybody else, and she's like, oh
right. That's yeah. Anyway, I'm curious what people thought about that scene, because for book readers it was confusing, because in the book there's speculation as to why Balon died or how he died, whether he was just swept off in a storm or if a faceless man killed him. So it was really weird that when he looks up and he says brother, at first I thought, oh, it's actually going to be a faceless man. Mm-hmm. And honestly, at first I thought, oh, holy crap, did Jaqen Hagar just pull Arya off the streets, give her her eyes back, and send her to kill Balon.
Well,
that literally went through my head. Like, how could she have gotten there so fast?
But
then he says brother, and I think that maybe that's, maybe there'll be a mystery and like a couple of, well, there already is, Yara's like, I will find out who did this and, kill them. So yeah, I guess there's supposed to be some mystery on the show as who killed Balon. So Euron will just show up in some crazy way with a bunch of ships in another episode or two. And
I'm pretty convinced that that's the solution to the Marine ship problem is somehow Pike. And that's the only reason to bring Pike back into it is because they fill that story need. So if we have to get, if we have to have Christmas with the Greyjoys as a result, fine. But at least it, unlike Dorne, it, it made sense to me. It's like it just felt more organic to what was going on. Then all of a sudden, like, hey, here's this place you'd never heard of that isn't really going to matter in the long run. And I don't know, I liked it a lot more. I do like the fact that Balon's gone, especially after he, sort of dressed down Yara. I also, it was annoying to me they didn't include that flashback, like you were saying. I was expecting the flashback at the beginning of every episode, they do the little montage of flashbacks that sort of tee up what we might be seeing. And I didn't see the whole Melisandre doing the blood-sucking leech thing and saying Balon's name.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't there. So when it happened, I was like, oh God, they're doing this now. Like, it just knowing that he was probably going to go, I was just like, oh shit, they didn't tease this at all.
And there's a moment where they, where he has the stern words with Yara, and then he walks out and they close up on her just staring at him, and I was like, oh, okay, we've got a couple episodes of everyone's getting mad at Balon, so we don't know who's going to kill him. And then the very next scene, he walks out on that bridge, and I was like, oh shit, like he's a goner.
Yeah.
So, and it definitely happened. I mean, that was another moment where I felt like, I could hear the VCR in my head of like just speeding, like fast forwarding through it. But really, they had to get it done. I mean, there's just so much other story to tell.
Exactly.
And
it was them getting out of their own. It was them getting out of their own damn way. It felt like this whole episode was them going, we don't have the books anymore. We don't have all this stuff. Like we're going to get, and I felt like all the stuff that happened to me, it wasn't throwaway. It was fast, but it wasn't like, oh, you never saw this coming. And it felt like, okay, this all is headed towards something, but they were really clearing the gunk out of the pipes of the story,
So I'll say one more thing about the Greyjoys, and then I'll move to another fast forward moment, which is I think the ships thing is for sure a reason why they've decided, the Greyjoys are going to play a bigger role, because they're going to maybe team up with Daenerys and get her to Westeros. Yeah. So it would be totally interesting if the Greyjoys, the Martells, and the Targaryens are all like teamed up and somehow, with Greyjoys transporting Targaryens to the Martells and Dorne. And
Tyrion is the one who can negotiate all that. He is very well positioned to be the one to put. If you're like, how could that make sense? Like Tyrion can make it make sense. He drinks and knows things, as we found out. So like that, and he's there.
Yeah.
So
that's what he is. He's the negotiator. He's the lubricator.
Yep.
I do think that the reason that they're like, when you say like, why do they appear, is because Theon has been such an interesting character to watch, and they don't, and that was a big moment. I thought, I mean, it's quiet, but it's a moment of Theon saying, I'm going home last night. And he means he's going back to Pike, and it's going to,
he thought the fact that he thought Pike was a bigger punishment than the Wall says a lot about his state of mind right now, where he's just like, I deserve to be punished, and that's going to be worse than anything else I can think of right now. So there,
definitely. And there's some significance to, his father's dead, and he is the only remaining son of his father. And even though that doesn't, I think that's the other thing that's weird, is I think in the books that the King's Moot, the rules of it's not just when a king dies, they have a King's Moot. I believe, I could be totally wrong, please correct me. I believe in the books, it happens because they do, like the people of Pike do not trust Theon as their rightful heir, because he's a contested heir because he grew up with the Starks.
Gotcha.
So they decide to have a King's Moot, where Yara decides to join in it, which is sort of like shocking. Whereas last night they just sort of said it like all factual, like, well, the King's Moot will determine that. It's like,
we have one every year. Bring out the
it was like, it's not the Olympics. Like,
get out the barbecue. Let's go.
Like it's it's not an election.
Yeah.
So it's very weird to see, but I felt like that was fast forward. So the other fast forward moment, which I did like, was Arya. Did you feel like that was enough begging for her?
Yeah, yes, because if I see one more, I was even telling myself, I'm like, if I see one more scene with Arya and the waif, just her being this, like, we don't need it. Doesn't nothing matters. Like, the actress who plays the waif is like my least favorite actor on the show, other than I take it back. The guy who plays Ramsay, the character is shitty, but the actor is amazing. That actress who plays the waif, I want her gone. So I couldn't bear one more scene. So when Jack and Hagar pulled up, I was just like, okay, thank God. Something's gonna, and then I am still mad that they didn't use it as a training moment for her. It's like she just got the shit beat out of her for no reason. It wasn't like the waif was like, hey, you learn to listen to your environment. There was no training involved, or Arya wasn't smart enough to go, oh, I should probably use this to my advantage and learn what I can from this. It looks like that's gonna come in the next one, just with the little training montage scenes that they've been showing us. But I don't know. It was a swift end to a pointless plot in my mind.
I agree. And see, that's one of those places where we sometimes favor action rather than plot exposition, because they've almost set us up for these bad expectations. Like when, in episode 1, I thought, oh, Jesus, is this going to be a whole season of Arya being blind and getting her ass kicked?
Well, and when she didn't learn anything, it wasn't like,
and then it's funny, it gets resolved and I'm like, wow, they fast forwarded through that. But no, that's what they're supposed to do. Luke wasn't on Dagobah for an hour.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and again, if they're not going to show us something new, and in the 2 scenes we saw is the same, you could have taken the waif beating her down scene and plopped into the last episode, and it wouldn't have made any difference. It's like they weren't advancing anything. So I'm like, if you're not going to do anything with this, just end it. And they ended it. I was like, okay, great, perfect. Go back to, and honestly, like, if Jack and Hagar is not in an episode after, if he doesn't appear eventually, I start to get a little consternated too. That actor, as annoying as the waif actress is, the Jack and Hagar actor is unbelievable.
Well, and I think we talked about that on the last episode of, like, why are we seeing the waif put Arya through these trials rather than Jaqen, because we enjoy him so much more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, maybe she was the warm up act. Maybe Jaqen's going to be like her true mentor in the training situation. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it, especially with what we saw in the next week on Game of Thrones.
Do you think, by the way, do you think Arya believes she's no one, or she's just paying lip service to it?
That's an interesting question. I don't think she really believes it now. I think that's part of her training. Like, she's learning to repeat that until she gets to that point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of those funny things too, of like, we don't want to see her left penniless in the streets for months.
Yeah.
But that is obviously how they train those, faceless men and women and little girls, apparently, to, forget their identity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So bouncing to another Stark, what about that brand scene that opened it all up?
Oh my God.
Did you get it? Did you like it? Did you?
Oh, I loved every minute of it. I adored it. I adored it because it just jumped right in. It assumed that last season he was gone because he was figuring out how to do all this stuff. So it didn't, it supposed a certain intelligence in the audience, which I loved. I find it interesting, kind of as an aside, that obviously Max von Sydow, who plays the Three-Eyed Raven now, was not who they cast for that little tag scene the last time we saw Bran. Yeah. It was some other actor. And I love me some Max von Sydow, don't get me wrong. But I wonder if there's like some contractual obligation where he has to appear to look exactly the same in whatever he's cast in. Because they didn't even bother to give him any aspect of the costume from the last Three-Eyed Raven, which I thought was kind of a cool costume. Like the beard and the sort of like hippie, scraggly, kind of thing. It was just, Max von Sydow could have walked off of the Force Awakens set right on screen. Maybe he did.
He was like, I can do it, but I'm already in this robe for Force Awakens. And they're like, just come on over.
I'll even go back way far to a deep cut. He was in the Robin Williams movie, What Dreams May Come. wearing exactly the same thing plus a hat. So it's just like, he doesn't, like, they don't give him, I love that actor. I adore him, but it was just like, it was a little bit of an off-putting thing at first. I'm like, did that even give him I had to actually go Google the old actor just to see what the difference was. And it was kind of alarming how different it is. All that to be said, though, I love everything about that scene. I love that they introduced Liana finally as a character.
It was very cool.
There's a lot of foreshadowing there. I love that you got to see him, basically a mirror scene to one of the season one scenes where instead of Rob training Bran, it was Eddard training the other Stark, the Night's Watch Stark.
Benjen.
There we go. God, that was cool. Like that throwback was cool. And again, that gave me more feeling of, this is like season 1 and 2 and 3. It was that kind of thing. It was cool seeing Winterfell as a happy place again. We haven't seen that for a while. And more importantly, it was really cool to see how Hodor started. Like the fact that he, that was like, just little reveals like that and does that happen in the book at all? Do you know? Was that a show specific thing?
No, it was definitely a show specific thing.
Oh, that's great. That's even more, that makes me more happy. And that's the liberty they have now, is to be like, we're going to tell you, we're going to give you a little, we don't have to tell you the whole, there doesn't have to be a whole Hodor episode, but just giving you like, what he was like as a kid, and hey, he could speak as a kid, and like, well, now it's like, what happened to him? And that's I'm sure a cool little thing we'll find out along the way.
Yeah. It's, it was a very cool scene. Did you, how did they do it?
How did they do what?
How did the Three-Eyed Raven and Bran end up back in Winterfell? Like, what do you think was going on there?
Well, they were obviously warging. It starts with their eyes kind of glazed over like they do when they warg. So it must be some kind of advanced warging into time and space itself. My guess is that, in the last year that he's been gone training, that's what they, there's probably like endless episodes we would have had where he's like, all right, Brian, we got to go. He does it for 5 minutes. He does it for 10 minutes. I adored the line that he delivers where he's like, that was something cool. Why did you pull me back? He's like, it's always beautiful under the ocean, but if you stay too long, you'll drown. That wasn't exact. Or I was like, it's always beautiful under the sea, but if you stay too long, I'm like, I love that sentiment, because I was very much like Bran. I'm like, I want to see more of this. This looks cool. And, so the fact that there was a decent reason for why was really cool. And delivered by Max von Sydow, of course. Anything that guy says is just cryptic and meaningful and interesting. So.
Well, and my guess, and I believe it's probably something that I heard from another podcast that was much smarter than I am, was that they recast that role because they thought of a better way to present that stuff than it is in the books. And they, and it kind of occurred to them, like, we ought to just have their bodies walking around in these flashbacks. There's no other way to sort of talk about that. And it will be interesting. First of all, it's cool to see Bran walking around.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you're going to do that, you ought to have Max, von Sydow with you, and not just some bearded guy that's part of a tree.
Yeah.
What is missing for me is that when Bran it meets the Three-Eyed Raven or Blood Raven or whatever he's called, like in the books, that's one of those moments where all this stuff, like creepy magical stuff, happens. And I don't think it's especially tightly written in a way that's like, oh my God, I just, it's sort of like putting things together, which is the thing with Martin's writing, is like, which is probably deliberate, but I think I've said before, like, I had to read The Red Wedding like 3 times because I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Did you just kill everybody? There's just some vague stuff. Like, it's like, it's not like, and then he shot Rob in the chest. It's like, Rob, his shoulder was feathered with a dart. And you're like, feathered with a what?
What?
So when Bran goes, becomes part of the tree with the tree man that's already there, to me, the coolest part about that is how it shows that the old gods are like an active religion, which is something I brought up in one of our like earlier podcasts last week or the week before, where it's interesting to see the religions that work, quote unquote, in Game of Thrones, because all those weirwood trees that the Northerners pray to have a face carved into them. And that's how the old gods see. They see through all those trees, and to them, like, time doesn't exist. They just see all scenes at once, wherever they want to go. So when Bran becomes part of that tree, he can just access any weirwood in the world and just see it.
Well, okay, and this gets us slightly into,
as far as I understand.
Gets us into spoilery territory for next episode. But is there a weirwood tree at the Tower of Joy?
Well, I think the show's doing away with that conceit.
Okay,
and especially because when I I don't know, because I don't hang out with a lot of book readers to talk about this stuff, but warging is definitely like, it happens in the books, but that's a term I hear more from viewers because that's how they're interpreting everything. And so I think your interpretation is correct. Like that's what the show is seeing you, is that there's some super warg power and it's not necessarily religious, but the part to me that was always so fascinating was that the ravens and the trees were like a physical manifestation of this religion. Because I think what they end up doing is seeing through the eyes of the ravens that are flying from these trees.
Okay.
Or something like that, or they can see through the face of the tree or whatever. And it was just so fascinating to me to be like, wow, that's so crazy. At the end of their religion is literally a guy slowly becoming part of the tree himself that has this like magic power. So I do think they're just kind of skipping that, which is fine. Like this is me maybe, just throwing that out there as like an enrichment kind of detail.
I appreciate
it's not
that.
a criticism. I'm fascinated by that like, we see the drowned god and we see the seven as almost like more traditional stuff. Like George Martin said that the seven pretty much represent the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And then so the red god and the old god seem sort of, mystic
Sumerian
and weird,
or something,
but it turns out like they're the ones that actually work.
I did find it's interesting you mentioned that this is a complete just random detail, but the one, again, going back to Max von Sydow, like the way they portrayed that character in the last time we saw him, he was very much entangled into the tree. Like it was built into the tree more. This just looked like Max von Sydow was just kind of hanging out on a stool in in a branchy area. It didn't feel like he was as taken by the tree. So I don't, again, just small little quibbles, but the other part of that scene that I really dug, and it set up all this, and it really kind of struck me. I was like, ooh, interesting, was when, Jojen's sister, what's her name? Mira is hanging out outside, and the little redesigned forest child comes up to her and is like, why are you so sad? And she's like, well, it's, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like I just sit here. And she's like, you're going to have to be with Bran. He's not going to be here. You're going to have to help him. He's not going to be here forever.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, because I this whole time have thought, oh no, he'll just, once he's there, he's just going to kind of operate out of this this mission control center for all of Westeros and do his thing. So what is he going to end up doing? Where are they going to send him? Like I don't know. That's so interesting to me. And I love the fact that the Bran actor is really good now. Like that kid is like, in just the short time we saw him, I'm like, oh man, this kid's chops. I mean, he was never terrible. He was never a terrible actor, but he just conveyed so much in that short little period of time. I can't wait to see more of what they do with him.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I can't, when you're whatever, a 16-year-old kid or something, they're like, yeah, say these lines, but don't move your body at all.
Yeah.
It's got to be really weird.
And he's done great.
This, so
he's done great with what he was given. Don't get me wrong, but like there was something about his
well, he definitely he showed back up after one season and he seemed to have like grown a beard and aged like 10 years. And his voice was all changed and everything. And it was like abrupt. Like we were like, whoa. You know, it sort of distracted us from whatever acting job he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he did a lot of like riding around in a wheelbarrow, just yelling at Hodor.
That's
season or whatever.
That's true. I think I was also a little surprised he didn't age as much in his time off. I kind of expected him to be like, like even more grown, but if anything, he just had a shorter haircut and he was just a teeny bit taller. But that was, even his appreciation for the fact that he could move around freely in this sort of dreamscape, like just a lot of little things like that.
Yeah.
What
was I going to say? I'm interested in what the Children of the Forest are alluding to. Like he's got another role to play. Because I think, I mean, what I took away from that too is like the White Walkers are going to come destroy this place. Maybe. I don't know if I'm right or not, but in the books, as fascinating as it is, like that like religious part of it was very cool to me. But the general, like, let's catch up with Bran in this tree was extremely boring.
Yeah.
You know, I actually tweeted out the other day this screenshot from an Amazon review that I saw before I read the book, where this guy his Amazon review was just catching up with the characters and them not doing anything. It's like, I'm Davos and I run errands for King Stannis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a living. And then it was, I'm Bran. I am a tree. Because that's literally like the whole book is just him, in the roots of the tree having visions. So yeah, hopefully they give him good ghost busting to do.
Let's kind of wrap up with any final sort of musings on things. I think the other big scene we sort of glossed over was just the Ramsay Roose scene, which at this point,
we've got two then. Let's hit that one.
At this point, what is there to say about Ramsay that hasn't been said before? He's going to Ramsay his little Ramsay head off, and we're all just going to
see the Roose death coming.
No, and two things were interesting about that. One, how much it mirrored Roose's killing of
Catelyn. Maybe not Catelyn, but Robb.
Robb, there we go. God, Robb.
Jamie Lannister.
The way it was shot, and just like even like the position of the bodies. The other thing was, and maybe you were like this too, I didn't know who had killed who for a few seconds. I was like, who just killed? What?
I, for whatever reason, noticed Ramsay's knife, even though he always kept it there. Mm-hmm. I noticed it like when he went over to hug Roose, and I was like, here it comes.
Yeah. I missed that completely. And just the way they both, like, because Ramsay kind of like jilted back like he had been stabbed. So I was like, oh God, did they kill? And of course not. Like, I do like the fact that he's kind of sowed his own fate with that, especially after Roose deliberately told him, like, if you act like a mad dog, you're going to get put down like a mad dog. And now he's the mad dog in charge. So it's like, what else can happen?
See, that was one of those places where, I thought the action was like so many other times Game of Thrones like lets that simmer for a while. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those places where I thought, if you're going to kill him, now is the moment. You just found out there is a legitimate heir to the throne, and your father just told you he's threatened you with feeding you to the pigs.
Yep.
And he stabs him. So, and you made a note about this, about Lady Walda's death.
Yeah.
What did you want to say about that?
I just think, the only part of the episode that kind of was like a throwback to last season was when they drug us through the whole, like, how he's going to kill her. What's he going to do? Oh, he's going to take her to the dogs. Oh, they're going to let the dog, like, I mean, I was surprised they didn't just let us see the dogs, like, munch on her. Like, they did everything, but they cut away at the last possible second. And I'm like, that was such a season 5 thing. All they needed to do was just have Ramsay go, tell the maester, bring her and my brother down here.
And wouldn't that be more of like, that would be such an old, like, like old school horror movie kind of thing.
Yes.
To summon her and then in the next episode show her funeral or something.
Yeah, or just show him like gnawing on a bone or something, or like a dog gnawing on a bone with like Walda's, or like a baby's wrap or something.
It would have been so much
God.
Creepier,
Yeah. And it's just like what we got was just too. It was too in your face. It was too just ridiculous. It was always too cartoony. It was just like we didn't need it. So I would rather they have just cut that shorter. Yeah. The other thing that was interesting to me about that is again, the fact that Bruce kind of foreshadowed what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Walder Frey is super pissed about all this, because that Walda was his key to kind of higher and greater things. And now that she's gone, killed deliberately by Ramsay. And I don't know, this poisoning thing is obviously not going to hold water when both Roose and she and the kid were all killed. So it's like, I would imagine Walder Frey's allegiances are going to change again in a hurry.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the Freys do now, because we are getting more of that. Like last season was so not the Game of Thrones, and we're getting a bunch more of that now. Where you're right, everything Roose said.
You just totally nailed it. You just totally nailed the problem with last season. Is that it was the last season there was no Game of Thrones being played.
Well, it's so weird because for at least seasons 3 and 4, and maybe even before that, I was thinking, oh my God, people, you have got to pay attention to the problem coming over the wall. Mm-hmm. And then it's so, I guess what I hoped for in season 5 was more of that turning their attention to the global problem and not the little local stuff. But in retrospect, it really took away from the whole, what got us there in the first place was all that backstabbing and politicking. Yeah. And then for them to throw it away for a whole season, because even when Littlefinger shows up in season 5, we didn't, he just sort of tells us like stuff that he's doing with the Knights of the Vale or whatever. We don't know.
Yeah.
No, we don't get to see that. Like he's made some deal with the Lannisters and the Boltons, but we don't see it happen. So we really missed out on that.
Yeah.
So we're going to see it now because we've got, there's all the power is changing hands. And Balon said, they called it the War of the Five Kings and 4 of them are dead. And then the very next scene, he's dead. So all 5 kings are dead.
Yeah. What was the other scene that we missed that we want to give a quick shout out to?
Yeah, I had 2 quick things on Walda. One was when Ramsay asked if he could hold his brother. I swear in the shot, like in the shot that's on him before it switches to the shot over his shoulder on Walda, there's a well. And I was so convinced he was just going to take the baby and throw it down the well.
How did I not notice that? You noticed all this stuff in that scene. I didn't catch any of that. Oh my God.
And then the second thing was, after last week, there was some griping online that these dogs that tore apart, the Theon saw hunt people, didn't do anything to Sansa when they caught up with her. But I noticed that the dogs that he releases to kill Waldo were like angry, like pit bull Rottweiler things. And the ones that found Sansa and Theon were bloodhounds.
Gotcha. So that makes sense.
I was like, wow, that's a really clever detail that they put in there. Like these were the tracking dogs that they released on Theon and Sansa, not the hunting dogs that are going to eat them.
Yeah.
Because they knew we've got to bring them back alive. So that's why those dogs just ran away when everybody started getting hacked to pieces.
Gotcha.
They weren't the hunting dogs that were going to eat people. And it explains why Theon was afraid of them, because he was like, no, I've seen these dogs. They're going to kill us.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the last thing we got to hit is Tyrion releasing the dragons.
Yes. I mean,
which
it was
to
small.
me,
go ahead.
I am so team Targaryen for Tyrion right now.
You want him to be a Targaryen?
He is a secret Targaryen.
So to flesh that out real quick for those who don't know, there's a rampant fan theory that is probably next in line after Jon Snow is a Targaryen. Is that Tyrion is the son of his mom, but also is it Aerys Targaryen?
I don't know.
The Mad King.
Well,
the Mad King.
Yeah.
Wanted Joanna. Is it Joanna Lannister? I think
so.
Lusted after her and actually raped her, which is why Tywin is kind of offended to have this. He never really loved Tyrion. Tried to drown him when he had him. Like he was just this reminder of this thing that happened. And if that ends up being true, it almost speaks more to Tywin for keeping him around and actually giving him the last name Lannister and all that stuff. I don't want it to be true. I don't want him. And I've explained this last time, I think it was our preview.
We did bring it up. Yeah.
I don't want him to be a Targaryen. As cool as it would be, yes, all this fan wish fulfillment would be fun, but it takes away from his struggle and his sort of trying to find his place in the world. And even though we don't get a lot of sense of this from the show, Tywin was very different from his father. His father was kind of a slack ass loser, and Tywin built their fortune. It would be really cool to see Tyrion in a very similar vein, take a complete different direction from his father and build his own place in the world. I want that for him as a character.
Yeah, I get that. What was I going to say?
You want him to be a Targaryen. You want it so bad.
Well,
you want him to walk through the flame.
What's bringing me around that way is that the big thing with the Targaryens is the 3-headed dragon. Like that's their sigil, and actually, when you fall down the YouTube rabbit hole on this, it's amazing. So there's a great scene between Tywin and Tyrion where Tyrion is asking for Casterly Rock or whatever, like he's like, you should make me the heir with Jaime gone. And Tywin says, because I cannot prove that you are not mine, I kept you around, but I'm not you are never going to be my heir.
Did he? I didn't remember that at all. I remember that scene and that conversation, but I don't remember him saying those words. That's
so and then there's like this lore that they have planted in the show too, which is Tywin says to Arya when she is like his, handmaiden. Remember when she's pretending to be someone else and she's in Harrenhal.
I love those scenes. I love those scenes.
Are great scenes. And
Maisie Williams and Charles Dance. Her, and then she had like the same chemistry with the Hound actor too. She's really good with these older British actors.
So that scene, well, there's one where he says something about I don't know if it's Aerys or if it's Rhaegar or or Aegon or whoever, some Targaryen that was riding a dragon, and she says, well, his sisters too. And she brings up there were 3 of them that rode the dragons, and there's always 3 that ride the dragons. And Dany has 3 dragons, and so if Dany we know is a Targaryen, and Jon we're pretty sure is a Targaryen, what are you just going to put a Lannister on the 3rd one?
No, they're going to
Like
dredge up Aegon in season 7 and try to explain his story. And
if Tyrion's going to be a dragon rider, I think he has to be a Targaryen.
Well, if that proves true, last night's little scene was a good little shout out to that. You know, it was a good
in the books, the Martell that's gone to Meereen goes in to see the dragons and gets burned to death.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't believe it when I knew that scene was coming. I was like, oh my God, are they going to show him not getting burnt?
Yeah.
That's like what was on my mind. But I think even if you don't believe that Tyrion's a Targaryen, it totally fits with his character where he somehow sweet talks these giant monsters. I loved the part where, who knows which dragon's which, where the second one like turned to give him the neck, like cool. Right where the bolt was, just proving cool. Its intelligence and everything. I did feel like, again, it was a little rushed, but I only feel like those scenes are rushed in comparison to the scenes that are so slow.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
To me, it was like, finally, of course, Tyrion is like, something has to be done. I'm going to go do it because none of you will do it.
Yeah. I love that they give him that, like, he's returned to that sort of position of, I know, like, again, very much like he was in season 2 when he was the temporary hand of the king and was just running around like,
exactly.
He knew what to do. He knew, like, it was a lot of that again. And you had, God bless Colin Hill, who plays Varys. Like, that dude, his little looks and reaction shots and everything, like, he didn't have to say anything. Just him standing at the top of the stairs while Tyrion's walking down there was just magical. Like, I love that.
Well, I love he gives him this tiny little nod when Tyrion comes back up. It's like, if I ever suggest doing something like that again, punch me in the face.
I love that.
It's like there's just this tiny little acknowledgement of it that was really good.
I love that. I love that whole scene. That was a good scene.
Let's move to a preview for the next episode, unless there's anything else you want to hit from this episode.
No, I think we covered it. I'm sure there's some we didn't cover, but it's good Lord, there's so much going on. How could we fit it all in? So we've officially talked longer than the episode itself, which is always a good sign.
Well, I'll hit the crazy thing first, and then we can talk about the other stuff, which is there's a fight scene that was previewed in the second trailer for the season that has now been previewed in the next week on Game of Thrones. And it is, I'm going to say, absolutely a flashback at the Tower of Joy. I was a little, like, the first time I saw the next week on, I was confused, and that's why I went back and watched all these videos on people, like, picking apart the trailer. There is a Targaryen sigil on the armor of one of the knights fighting. Mm-hmm. And so the people who believe that, we know what's happening, is that is the Kingsguard of Aerys. Mm-hmm. And then there's this knight that shows up to fight that says something like, I can't even remember the line. It's, some real cheesy thing, but he definitely has a Ned Stark-ish,
I saw that,
Irish kind of accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe that is
Sean Bean too. Like, he had kind of the eyes that Sean Bean has. So yeah.
Arthur Dayne, that's the knight. That's the Kingsguard that we think might be the Targaryen's Kingsguard.
And I won't even bother. Just if you want to know what Tower of Joy is, go Google it. You'll have a lot of fun figuring out what that.
What's where John was
born. Or that.
But there's so much. There's a tower in the background. It's just that there's a couple weird cuts that make it like one of those other things where you're like, wait, are Bran and Three Eyes in the same place that this is happening, or did they just ut it to make it look that way? Mm-hmm. I don't know. So there's only one other scene that I really noticed that I thought was such a creepy part. But if there was anything that you saw coming, let me have it.
The only other scene I found interesting, because obviously Jon Snow's back. We got 2 seconds of it. So what happens next? There's a shot of what seems to be him kind of wandering through the wildling camp out, at the wall, and they're all like staring at him like, "Yo, you're Jesus." Apparently, May 1st is Easter in Game of Thrones, because that's when Jon Snow comes back from the dead after being in the tomb for 3 days. But he comes out, and then I think we hear, I just forget, Tormund. Tormund, yeah. Tormund's just like, "They think you're a god," like, it's that whole thing. So it's like, I'd love to see what they do with that. And then more importantly, they didn't show it, but I can't wait to see how Melisandre reacts to this. I'm so fascinated by what's she going to be. Is she going to be all cocky? Is she going to be like grateful and more pensive? Like, what is her character now after this?
Maybe she's the person they think is a god. But I love that you picked that up as like he's walking out, because I don't think we see any of him, but I think that point of view is definitely like from their feet, sort of looking up at the crowd.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's almost like you're from John's like POV of like him walking into the courtyard or something. But maybe he is sort of in the periphery. Maybe there's some body there that I didn't notice. But
yeah,
it's creepy. So the one thing I picked up on is that Ramsay's like, what, there's some scene where he's confronting these northern lords saying, how dare you come here? What brings you here? And they say, we've brought you a gift. I think it's Rickon.
You think it's Rickon?
Yes, because Rickon and Osha went to stay with the Umbers.
That's right.
I believe, I don't remember, it's not the Karstarks whom they, previewed in that last episode and then had a Karstark in the scene where Ramsay kills Roose. But I think this is the Umbers bringing Rickon to him. At least I certainly hope it is Rickon and not Theon or Sansa, because I just hate the idea that people keep escaping and keep getting recaught. So
but here's the problem. It's not going to be Sansa. We know that's almost a guarantee, but I wouldn't mind if it's Theon, but if it's Rickon, like that poor kid's going to die in 10 seconds. Like what the hell is Ramsay at this point? What is Ramsay not going to do to him? I don't see, he can't kill them because of what Roose explained to him about the strategy. Like, you don't have a tie, you don't have a hold on the North. They're never going to support anyone who's not a Stark. And you've got, you're lining all these houses up against you. You can't just go around acting like a mad dog. He responded to that by up and killing his dad and basically going, I'm going to do this my way. So I don't,
I agree. But if the Umbers, and there may be something about why the Umbers are pissed at the Starks too, but if he's got that, if they deliver him, maybe his deal is like, then he sends a crow or raven to Castle Black and tells Jon, like, we've got your little brother and send your sister back down here.
And instead Jon sends the wildlings down there, and that because that's what's coming, is that Jon's going to lead some army of some sort down to retake Winterfell. So maybe that's the spark.
Well, and it would be really cool if, I'm sorry, Samantha, but I would love it if all these like big action pieces started happening this year, so we can kind of get ready for the actual Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. I want, as I'm thinking about it, I would love at some point this season to have a scene in Winterfell between Jon, Rickon, and Sansa, maybe Bran, but probably not. But those three at least reuniting in Winterfell and just, dealing with all the shit that's going down. Like just after the dust settles, just those three kind of being like, we're a family again. Oh my God. Yeah. Just even for a moment, just would be cool to see some sort of reconstruction of the Winterfell we knew,
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, I have a couple of like grim predictions that I won't say on, but on like who I think is going to eat it this season. So
give me one that I would never see coming.
I think Rickon's pretty safe bet.
Really?
I just don't think. I just don't know. Like, why would you? That character's not been developed at all. So if they're gonna use him as some kind of tool, I totally agree with you. Like, and especially with all the other stuff with Ramsay, it's like, yeah, how else did you think he was gonna act? He is Ramsay,
I feel like Rickon needs to be saved though, because at the end of all this, he might be the only one left to take Winterfell back. He might be like the sort of ambiguous
if he
young
was
lord,
the one that escaped unscathed,
And I mean, maybe Sansa is there, and she, he's like there too. But it's not going to be Jon. It's not going to be Arya. It's not going to be Bran. It's just either going to be Sansa or Rickon. And Sansa, I feel like, is going to have some other moment of something else is going to happen with her. So I feel like there's got to be Rickon's almost just kind of being held there, like story wise, like, and then he'll, when he grows up, he'll start the cycle again. Something where it's just like you need one of the innocent ones to like, you can't just be some fucked up, like just tortured person, like running Winterfell. It's got to be somebody who's like had it relatively easy, I would think, but that
would be interesting. I that's a cool theory. I support that. Like if he just shows up and he's like the unscathed Rickon, that's like
Rickon the unscathed. That's his name.
I forgot my crazy ass prediction is that I wonder if, since we've seen Hodor as a child, if whatever accident occurs that takes his speech away from him is somehow related to him knowing the secret of Jon's parentage.
Ooh, that he's there with them at the Tower of Joy?
I wonder.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Especially when we see old Nan take him away and say, "You're never going to be a fighter. You're, a farmhand or whatever."
Well, and she does that, and Ned's like, if he learned to fight, he'd be the strongest mofo out there. Like that. I love that, by the way. I love that Ned was a huge fan of him as a kid, and then like that would explain so much, though. That would explain why they.
There's a video that I'll link that was IGN made where they pull apart the trailer where they're showing this is Arthur Dane with the Targaryen, and they say, and we think he's fighting Ned right here, but when you look at it, it's kind of a pudgy guy with a beard, and I think that's not Ned. Although, and they show that person has a shield that looks like it has the Stark sigil on it, but that person does get stabbed, like run right through. With a sword, but it doesn't look like it's Robert or Ned. And I just kind of went through my head of like, oh my God, what if that was Willis getting wounded and it taking his speech from him or something?
God, that'd be great.
He knows.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh, that makes so much. Oh, now I want
so
this.
Crazy. So then,
I want this
because
so
there's
bad.
kind of this continuing question of like everyone who knows the secret of Jon's parentage is dead. So like, is Bran going to realize it through, his sort of time travel teleportation thing? And then if he ever does, how would he ever tell Jon? Like, I mean, he's, we'd have to get those two people back in the same place. But what if it's like Hodor that can like walk around and just has the secret in his head?
God, that'd be great. And he's seen so much. Like Hodor might be the secret to the key to all of this is Hodor.
Yeah, and he's so much older than I thought he was. I thought that was a cool thing about that scene too. Yeah. Is realizing like, of course he has giant's blood. He's probably like 200 years old or something.
Well, yeah. He's like the Hagrid of this whole thing. I mean, literally. Yeah. I mean, almost the exact same character.
Man, I'm so glad you said that because last week I was kicking myself for not calling Sam the Hurley of this thing.
Yeah. Oh, oh, wow. You're so right. Oh my God. Sam is Hurley.
We were talking something about Lost and I was trying to think of that name. I was like, oh yeah, but that guy, that's like, what if it turns out it's just Sam's dream or something? And he's like the Hurley of this.
God, that'd be great. Well, on that note, I can't think of any better way to wrap this up.
We've totally angered the two people that left comments for us.
We've angered them. We pissed off everybody who thinks this is an hour. So
no, thank you both for leaving comments. We really love that stuff. Thanks for hanging with us while we talk crazy theories and other stuff, and hopefully not too many spoilers and book stuff.
That's right. You can download this wherever fine podcasts are.
Oh yeah, we didn't even announce that. We are now on Google Play.
We are.
Google Play has now incorporated podcasts. We submitted, got reviewed, and approved. So if you're an Android user, you've probably already got the Play Music app on your phone. Just look for Todd and Taylor Show. If you're on iTunes, we're already on iTunes.
SoundCloud.
We're on SoundCloud. That is our home base, and you can find us at toddandtaylor.com.
That's right. And I am at Taylor Trask on Twitter. And you?
I am at Hey Todd A on Twitter.
So tweet us up a storm there. Find us. Give us your feedback. We would love to read more letters from y'all out and kind of keep the conversation going. So let us know how you.
Such a good episode. So.
I loved it. Can't wait for next week. We'll see you next time. Same. I was gonna say same bat time. That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, next Wednesday, right? Next Wednesday.
Yeah, it's Wednesday in Westeros.
All right.